Alright, so just gonna get into the video. How to make WoW profitable again. So this video is pretty much just gonna have my own suggestions or rough ideas for things that they can do to make the game more profitable. Some might say it already makes a good amount of money. I would say it can make a lot more while also giving players, what they want. Kind of gonna reference, Spider-Man, the recent Spider-Man movie, where literally if you were a fan, you were pretty much given what you wanted, and the box office numbers honestly reflect that. So imagine if WoW gave us what we wanted. So in this whole video, obviously using PowerPoint, not that great at video editing yet. So my main points throughout this whole thing, and I'll go in a lot more detail, right? These are kind of like the main things that I'm going to be talking about. If you care about the monetization proposals I'm going to make, by all means, I'll try my best to put down timestamps below. So let's get started. So we all know the jailer, right? We all know what his thought process is, what his motivations are, how he thinks. So here's what I propose. Let's create an alternate timeline, or just flat out make him win. They haven't finished 9.2. I've seen, the leaks. It doesn't look good for a character that they tried to build up to be this big bad, and ultimately he's one and done in a single expansion, right? I do think he had potential. The writing wasn't the best, but what I'm proposing might fix that. So the narrative would be, very simply put, he does win, or he gets to touch, the essentially, Infinity Gauntlet, right, for like a few seconds to create an alternate timeline where he does win, right? That way they can still develop retail and then have essentially a new game as well, right? And the narrative could be that it's so much power he can't wield it efficiently, so he can, snap us out of reality. And it's also a great way to, narratively to kill off our heroes and any other characters that they might want to get rid of. So the idea would be that Anduin would sacrifice himself, or would give up a lot of, his life force or energy in order to create or shoot out these barriers into Azeroth in order to protect, the ones we kind of left behind before entering the Shadowlands. And, referencing again the Spider-Man movie, imagine if something like this played out as a final cinematic where, the jailer is pretty much winning, and as a final ditch effort to save pretty much the world, Anduin either sacrifices himself, or even Uther and Arthas kind of join him as former paladins to create this massive, ray of light that will shoot up and into, Azeroth from the Shadowlands. Ultimately, again, rough ideas. A lot of the ideas I think should be on the development table to be ironed out, but a general idea would be to have a barrier, let's say, surrounding. This would be one barrier that would be multiple throughout, Azeroth, so that, for example, with Goldshire inside, Goldshire could become a new, city hub, or a main settlement with, bank, auction house, mailbox, trainers, vendors, everything, right? So this ultimately would lead to the creation of Warcraft 4 and WoW 2.0. Now, Warcraft 4, in my opinion, serves multiple purposes. Warcraft 1, 2, and 3 were the foundations for World of Warcraft. I think because it's been now over 20 years since those games, I think we need kind of like a renaissance, right? They need to start fresh. I think creating Warcraft 4 would be a great way to have a clean slate in regards to storytelling, in regards to telling the lore, fixing some minor mistakes. They also have an opportunity to build up previous characters that they've introduced and really haven't done much with them, right? They could also introduce new ones, right? They can honestly start planning out the next 5 to 10 years properly, right? It could also tell the story of, from the moment we entered Shadowlands, what happened on Azeroth, right? There was a council of all the former, faction leaders. We essentially dipped. So what happened to them? Did something happen? Did anything happen at all while we were in the Shadowlands, right? We also don't know if time is relative, right? Was it the same amount of time, or has like 50, 100 years in the world passed by, right? We don't know, right? Something you can definitely play around with. It also redeems them if they do it right from Warcraft 3. And apologize for a typo. Warcraft 3 refunded, right? To be able to actually have it be developed in house and hopefully, live up to, supposedly their high level of quality, right? And again, this would be the foundation for WoW 2.0, right? They can both be developed side by side, and I think for the future of World of Warcraft, they need to use a new engine just so that we're not still using the same client and same game for the next 5 to 10 years, which I think would be a very bad idea for the health and success of the game. Now, the concept, right? What would WoW 2.0 even look like? Especially the jailer wins things fall to darkness. He's able to rebuild reality. So if you Google World of Warcraft AI images, some of these will come up. There's several more. Definitely recommend you take a look. Now, all of these are amazing. Obviously, they're distorted in certain areas, which I think is nice because you don't see a clear path in regards to how would you move up this mountain, or how would you enter this castle. It's very much ominous, right? And I think these serve as a good concept design for dungeons and future raids, or reimagining former dungeons and raids into what they would look like with the current events. Now, going back to this circle, right? What I propose, right, if you were to create a new character, your character at the creation screen, obviously you're selecting your class, but what if you could select your profession, right? I think one of the biggest issues a lot of MMOs have is that when you create a new character, everyone spawns in the exact same place, and that's terrible for launch, or at least the first couple of days of launch. I think having a more organic method of doing it would feel better, at least for the player experience. So I would propose, if you were a mage or priest, you could spawn in the mage tower. If you're a warrior paladin, you can spawn at Westbrook Garrison, which is at the east. Or if you're a hunter, you can spawn by the stables all the way towards, towards the east. Warriors paladins towards the west. Now, imagine if you were a miner as well, right, for your gathering profession, and you had the choice of spawning where your class would spawn, but also where your profession would spawn, right? So kind of choosing where you want to spawn, or just giving a random option. I think also spawning and having a tutorial quest close to you would be great for those who want the tutorial. If you know what you're doing, you just skip it and go where you want, right? Now, these are the systems I'll be discussing. Not as in depth I would like to, but presenting a rough idea of what they could be and how they would kind of play off each other. So the first one is shards and layering, right? In TBC Classic realms, a lot of them are pretty much dead, right? There is very little life in a lot of them, which is very unfortunate. No one likes a dead server just because it's a sign that a game is dying, that the population is going down, right? Having a mega server is a fix. Having shards and layering, I think, are a modern solution to a modern problem that we have, right? Where people will either lose interest, or because there isn't any new content, they'll just leave, and that greatly affects the, the interactions on that server, or even its livelihood. So having those options for a new MMO would be great. Now, the barrier, which would be like a safe zone, would allow people to instance or phase into other people's instance or layer, right? Now, if this barrier, right, is essentially where you kind of phase or instance when you're in a party, I think it's also a great way to be able to turn on or off PP mode as you leave the barrier, right? Whether you want to flag or not is entirely up to you. All right. So the next one is combat and companions. So the combat in the game, in its current form, I think, is fine. I think the leveling experience could definitely be improved. So I think having engaging combat would be better. So what I'm proposing is this, right? Imagine if enemies spawned with random abilities, right? Ranging from 1 to 4 different abilities, just kind of, keep you on your toes. Now, they don't always need to have synergy, but sometimes they can, which again could definitely, increase the level of danger that you would encounter while leveling. Now, this could also be proposed in dungeons, which would also get very hectic, but again, would keep things interesting. So, the rough idea would be that a lot of these abilities would individually be, something you can shrug off as a player, but obviously, if an enemy hits you with a bleed, and then a stun, and then a poison, and then you're trying to heal and they hit you with a silence, like that, that can mess you up. So, I think having enemies who also have different scaling to their stats, and this could be represented in their size or their color scheme to kind of show you, like, okay, if that enemy is glowing like green or blue, he definitely has more than 2 abilities, right? Or he is going to hit pretty hard, even if he isn't an elite. So with a harder um, leveling experience, right, I think would also improve overall engagement for leveling, but also make it a lot more harder for people to bot because obviously a bot is not going to react the same way as a player. However, because I do know some people are very casual or they might have a bit more difficulty, right? I think adding companions to the game would serve multiple functions besides just combat, but would assist in that manner, right? So companions could be any class, could be any profession. So companions could have up to 1 profession, right? And the idea is that they could either be random NPCs that you can recruit at like inns and taverns, or through side quests, or even through story quests, right? The idea is that they would serve multiple functions while you're online as well as offline. So the idea is that as a quick example, if you are offline and you are using the companion Blizzard app, right? You can tell your companion if they have, let's say, a gathering profession, if they have herbing, you can tell them to go herbing, right, until you log in, right? So every like 5 to 10 minutes, they might herb a single node, right, to give you an idea. Or after half an hour, they might encounter a monster which might delay them from gathering herbs. But if they kill the monster, they might you might get some extra loot, right? And so just to kind of have some purpose added to the mobile app as well. They can also um, they can essentially hold your gear, right? So they can have very limited inventory, or they can have like an equipment page. So if you're a warrior and your companion's a warrior, you can essentially funnel all your gear to them, making them a very powerful companion compared to other people's, especially if you do a lot of high-end raiding. So the other thing I want to talk about is raids and dungeons. So let me know down in the comments, why do dungeons, or specifically why do raids need to be for max level players, right? We have scaling, right? Why can't raids be for level 10s, right? My idea is that oftentimes not a lot of people are going to get to max level, especially if there's a harder difficulty to it. Think of classic WoW. Why not allow people to engage in end game content, not as soon as possible, but early on during their time at the game. So I'm proposing, Stormwind is a level 10 raid, scales up to 60. It would serve almost like a tutorial raid. Obviously, there are mechanics, there are things you have to, kind of learn and know about, but just the layout of it, and granted, this could be altered, but in its current retail layout, I think is phenomenal for player choice, right? You get to choose your path, right? Do you want to focus on this district or go to another district, or do you want to just rush towards the docks or rush towards the keep? You have that choice, and because it's very robust and has a lot of these stores, some of which we've never even been inside, it allows for a lot of rares, it allows for a lot of random encounters. And I think and I'll be proposing a gearing idea soon, but what if, those low level raid pieces could still serve a purpose by the time you're level 60, right? So before I get to that, quickly touching on dungeons, same thing as retail, but for Mythic Plus affixes, what if individual groups could re-roll their affixes for that run or even for that week, right? So because we use keys, what if a single player, chose to re-roll their affixes for their keys for that week, or to replace one affix with another, right? Either making it harder or easier for them, right? Having player choice. And for dungeons, right, when it comes to scaling, what if you're level 30 and all your friends are level 10? Can you still play with them? I would propose, why not? Right? Your stats and everything would be baseline, it would be averaged based on everybody else, allowing you to play with them. You're not one-shotting enemies, you're not carrying. Right? There's still a sense of danger there. I think also having modifiers to dungeons. So having the ability, as an example, the XP bonus for completion, you can increase that by an additional 15%, but downside is pack size in the dungeon increases by 15%. So extra mobs won't drop loot, but you'll have an extra 15% more XP if you complete the dungeon. Right? And this could be also added for like gold or for item drops, right? Increasing, I don't know, like enemy damage, increasing enemy HP, or all three of these could be in one, and the more you scale it, the harder the dungeon run will be, but the more loot experience and gold you could get, right? Just as a concept. Now, before I move on from dungeons and raids, the thing I would propose, again, if they want to be really innovative, Halo Forge I think is phenomenal. I think having a World of Warcraft dungeon editor would also be phenomenal. I think a lot of people are creative enough to do very crazy things. Think of, machinimas back in the day. Giving individual players the tools would not just add endless replayability and challenge to the game, but would really, immerse the community into the game a lot more and have player engagement. So the way I propose it is just straight up, you have access to every asset in the game, every enemy NPC, every ability, uh, boss mechanic, and just go wild, right? So I love Dead Mines as a dungeon, as a concept. What if, you have all the bosses in the first room, right? Or what if all the bosses are on the boat? Or what if you get to fight all the bosses gauntlet style, where Van Cleef would be, right? With no rest period, right? Could your group handle that? What if you have two bosses per every encounter, right? What if you increase the pack size? What if you add new NPCs that normally wouldn't be in that dungeon, right? Again, options are limitless. The only thing I would kind of add as a safety measure, right, so it's not exploited, but these bosses and mobs wouldn't drop anything. They wouldn't give XP. It's just for the experience of doing it. They could, however, drop a cache if you were to complete it. Obviously, there needs to be a certain time limit. You can't just complete something in 2 minutes and have a reward. But it could be currencies for different types of vendors. Again, very rough idea. And then I think giving players 3 custom layouts so you can mess around with every dungeon that you want would be a good starting point. And if you want more slots, you can buy more. Ultimately, I don't think this would work too well in raids just because of their overall size. But again, something that could definitely be ironed out at a development table. So, touching, gear progression. They've had different approaches to this over the years. My approach is just very simple, straightforward. You have your normal, heroic, mythic difficulties. They have their associated item levels. But what if you could increase it slightly? So the general idea is if you're level 60, right, and you did a raid back when you're level 10, right, it dropped a sword. You do it against when you're 60, and that same sword drops. It's an upgrade for you, which is great. It drops at item level 55. What if you could sacrifice that exact same sword that is, granted, a much lower level to increase the item level of your current weapon, right? So you can increase it by 1 item level. This incentivizes players to not just play with friends, with guildies, with lower levels, but to maybe do alt runs for gear, right, to helping out your friends, your guildies, right, and you would still benefit as an individual player, even if you were max level, even if the game scaled you down to a lower level, you would still have a chance at improving your item level and your gear. Now, as a quick side note, I think they should reintroduce resistances or kind of mess around with it, just because I think it does add more flavor to gear, where certain sets might be more preferable for like new raids or dungeons, so that there's always a reason to go back and do them, right? Along with having specific raid tokens or dungeon tokens for that dungeon or raid, where you might have like specific vendor that might sell you different things. Like again, using Dead Mines as an example, Dead Mine worker might sell you assets from within the dungeon that you can use for other stuff like decorations and accessories and player customization, right? As a thought, or even player housing if they were to add it. Which, speaking of housing, I think they should add it. First of all, second of all, how could they do it, right? In retail, they could go about it in different ways. I think in a new MMO, they can very easily just have a pocket damage, right? This could be done by Chromie, it could be done by a lot of different peoples, or it could just be done within the safety barriers, right, that were created by Anduin, so that you can show off your house. But obviously that takes up a lot of space. They could go the New World route, but preferably I say ideally just copy Final Fantasy XIV or WildStar, which although WildStar isn't a game you can play anymore, their housing, their approach to player housing was phenomenal, right? Companions can also be put to work in your house, or you can just leave them in a static post somewhere, right? You can have a whole theme, essentially, right? You have full control of the house, of furniture placement, of scaling. You could potentially even change the color or dye different furniture pieces, right? I think housing itself could be a huge gold sink, not just to increase its size, but have a giant guild home or even a giant guild plot where everyone can kind of build their own little house or apartment or whatnot. Just again, the options are limitless, right? And for those of you who collect mounts and pets, right, it would be a great way to position them in your house and just show them off. Now, for the customization, pretty straightforward. Transmog was a phenomenal system when it was introduced. I think going even further would be amazing. So allowing people to dye your armor, right? To be able to add armor for mounts, for making different changes on druid forms, adding armor, maybe removing it, having accessories. I've always played hunter. I've always wanted my pet to have some kind of weapon or armor, something, right, that I can play around with. I think having more frequent updates to hairstyles, tattoos, and facial accessories would be phenomenal. Before Shadowlands, we had an update, and I think a lot of us loved it because it just added so much more to the game, right? I think companions could also benefit from all these updates, right? So even if they add, a hairstyle or tattoos or whatever for a different race, even though your character isn't the race, you could have a follower that is from that race, and you could customize them the way you would like to, right? Especially if you're going for a certain theme as a player for your transmog or for your house. Now, because I did mention WildStar, I think WildStar had an amazing system where it was essentially a secondary class, which kind of catered towards what kind of world quest do you want, whether it's combat, exploration, or discovery. Because of how the world could be structured, you could absolutely have just bonus world quests to do while you're leveling. Right, you can still do the story, side quests, right? But you also have world quests. I think just to kind of spice things up. And a lot of these could have their own individual rewards. It would be a great way to design areas, at least level design, to have jumping puzzles, maybe secret areas they have to get through by doing mini games. It'd also be a great way to kind of discover old zones from retail or even from beyond that, or even characters who have maybe passed away and there's like an echo or something walking around. Now, When it comes to factions, I think the easiest way just would be to have, everyone can play with everyone. There are no restrictions. But I do know some people are very hardcore about their factions. So to still have like faction identity and choice, right? If, for example, if you're a very hardcore horde player, you can go traditional horde route where you have those restrictions, right? Where only certain classes can be certain races, where you can only interact and group up with other horde players. Whereas, a Modern Alliance, you could be any class, any race combo, and you can interact with everyone, right? Ultimately, advocating for player choice. Um, so if you're a Modern Alliance, you can go to any settlement. If, for example, you're a traditional Horde character, you can still go to like an Alliance town or settlement, but you'll be treated like a Death Knight, right? People are just gonna throw food at you. They're gonna, insult you. You have debuffs. You can't use like the auction house or mailbox, but you can still go there and just hang out. So the next one is modes. Now I'm gonna be honest, I'm literally copying a private server because I think they did a phenomenal job with these types of modes. So I think allowing people once you hit max to go back to level one and re-level, right? Again, player choice. If you want to do it, go for it. If you don't, you don't, right? But to have that option, I think is huge. I think hardcore mode is phenomenal, but I think tiers to how hardcore you want to go would be amazing, right? Because some people obviously want a very punishing experience. Same thing with Iron Man mode, right? Having options to how that would work or function. And then Nightmare mode, which is essentially a mode where you take 300% bonus magic damage, 200% bonus melee damage. So if you're a level 12, Hogger will two-shot you. If you're level 18 or level 20, the whelps in Red Ridge Mountain will essentially one-shot you with a single fireball, to give you context. Now, completing any of these modes, hitting level 60, would reward you with, a cache with additional gold, rep, currencies for, different faction vendors. Could even include Darkmoon Faire tickets, which, speaking of which, I think Darkmoon Faire needs a revamp. I say literally copy the Gold Saucer, honestly. I think the Brawlers Guild is also very much neglected. Why not just add it to the Darkmoon Faire, honestly? Have people be able to do solo PvE fights as usual, but also maybe add one-on-one PvP fights. You could have different rings spread out so people can spectate. You can send your companion to fight someone else's companion. Just, make a bet. Let the AI, do the rest. It'd be a great way to kind of gamble with, Darkmoon Faire tickets. I think also having pet battles be spectated and, being able to put bets on would be pretty fun. Now, I think having group fights with the Tavern Brawl would be pretty cool. So, essentially, just a group fight with random rules, right? So for those who might not be super hardcore with PvP, but with having a PvE element, so if you die, you explode for a certain amount of damage. You know, some people could focus certain players. There could be a lot of different rules to it. I think it could be a lot of fun. Now, Darkmoon Faire already sells a lot of good rewards. I think if they focus more so on selling housing rewards, cosmetics, toys, pets, mounts, all that would be phenomenal. And if it's daily, if it's updated daily, if they revamp the mini games, add new ones, it could be a very amazing feature and just an overall rewarding system, right? So pretty much why I'm saying copy the Gold Saucer. But again, general idea, you could buy tickets with gold or using a VIP memory card, which I'll discuss a little bit later. And then, you play games, you play mini games with tickets, and then you buy rewards with set tickets as well. Now, professions, I don't think they need much of a rework. I think they're pretty good the way they are, at least, for the first three expansions of the game. You can definitely add tiers, but I would propose primarily having players have the option to master a single profession. So in Classic, only those who choose to master mining can mine rich thorium nodes. If you master in herbalism, you're the only one who can herb Black Lotus, right? As an idea, right? That way, those harder level materials are limited to players who choose to master in said profession. Same thing with crafting, right? You can craft, pretty much equivalent raid gear, but you need to master in blacksmithing or leatherworking. So because archaeology, as far as I know, is the only second profession that was added with the systems I'm proposing, why not add woodcutting, carpenting? Cartography is a hit or miss, just because the way I see it, the world's ever just always changing. Think of like the map and different sections are kind of modular, and every month it just shifts, right? So now you have to kind of rediscover the whole map. I think for people who want to do those like discovery world quests or jumping puzzles, right? You can explore the map, you get rewards, and then you can kind of chart it out, and then you can sell the map for gold. Hit or miss idea, just because I know people can just screenshot it, and then it kind of defeats the purpose, right? But again, hit or miss idea, which I think could work, but it could also fail completely. Now, copying from private servers again, there's a thing called a calling board, right? Where you ultimately have daily, weekly, and even in this case, you could potentially have monthly quests that you can pick up for all play styles. So I think having low level materials still have purpose beyond just leveling your profession skill is great. So having, for example, a daily where you have to turn in 20 peace blooms and 10 linen cloaks, across the line, peace bloom prices will skyrocket, so will linen, just across the board. This ultimately, I think, is a great avenue for new players and even low level players to make money, because it's pretty easy to get, and if a lot of people are buying it, right, they now get a good extra gold to spend. I think it improves the economy overall. Rewards could also vary from extra gold, XP, as well as special currency for interacting with the calling board or bounty board, right? That you can then redeem for different items. Now, PvP, I'm no expert, but having watched a lot of other people's videos, this is ultimately what I propose, right? A 1v1 queue for people who just want a 1v1 in the arena. Giving people an option for BGs and even arena to have scaling or no scaling. So scaling, pretty straightforward, right? Everyone's item level and stats are just baseline, right? Now no one's getting one shot. It's all skill based, right? And then no scaling, where you want skill based, but you also want the benefit of your gear. Now, with raids, dungeons, and PvP, right? If you're a traditional horde player, you only want to play with horde. That applies to raids, dungeons, and PvP. Same for alliance, right? If you're modern alliance, you can play with anyone, so there's less restrictions. The other thing I would propose, which again is also copying from a private server, being able to go outlaw, right? Essentially, a free-for-all PvP debuff, so you can attack anyone and anyone can attack you, right? So if you want to gank someone, you activate this, and then you can fight, even if you're the same race, same faction, what have you, right? Now, private servers usually have high risks where you will drop some of your loot if they kill you, which can be a bit. There isn't much of an incentive, right? So I think keeping that out would be fine, or having a, same like the private servers, right? You have a high risk and low risk PvP mode, where low risk you could still, use outlaw, but if you go high risk, when you die, you do lose some of the gear either that you have equipped or that's in your bags. Now, as I mentioned before, in the safe zone, right, in this barrier, when you leave, you have the option to toggle that on or off. If you choose to, leave and engage in PvP, you're given this ability, right? So it's not something you always have. Now, when it comes to the community council, okay, so I think a proper community council should be something that is voted on by the community, not by Blizzard, not by Activision, right? So being able to have essentially different groups, and we get to vote on who we want to represent each group. So you could have people who represent the PvE/PvP community, professions, lore, transmog, mount collecting, achievements, even accessibility, because I know that's a thing that is growing. Having now housing, right? Having role players, etc. Right? Being able to have these small groups, anywhere from I don't know, like 3, 5, maybe up to 9 individuals who represent those specific communities, right? And then if they're voted by us, we ensure that they're people who we'll be vocal about what we as a community want, what we like, what we dislike, right? I think the proper way to do it would be, to actually have, essentially an election or a voting process. Obviously, it's going to be pretty much a popularity contest, but if the selected people represent like majority of the community, it makes sense, right? And it's something we can vote on a yearly basis, right? Primarily because we want them to represent what we want, and if things don't work well, obviously it's not their fault, but we want them to assist the developers in making good decisions on our behalf, right? So they can obviously sign an NDA. I think the proper way to do it would be for them to have a voice in the development process, right? So that when developers want to do something, the community council can interact with them, voice their own opinion, and kind of adjust the direction that different systems and content takes that would be acceptable for us as a community. Now, if the game goes free to play, in my honest opinion, I think it would be its saving grace with the way things are currently, just because although the numbers are down, right, you still have people paying subs, they're still making money through microtransactions, but I don't think the sub currently matches with what we're getting, right? The level of quality, the amount of content that we get compared to previous years, and having been someone who has been playing since 2005, 2006, it just doesn't compare anymore. So I think just get rid of the subscription because you already have a game store. Just focus on the game store, right? By going free to play, you pretty much open the floodgates. You would have so many more players. I can definitely see WoW going back up to 5 to 10 million active players easily if they went free to play, right? Especially if they also had pretty much all the recommendations I'm proposing as well as a bunch of other ones, right? So by having more players can engage with the store with the microtransactions. They can still obviously have expansions that are uh, pay to play, right? So that's still a bunch of people. If the barrier to entry is basically none, if you have 5, even up to 10 million players, if you have a very hype expansion coming out, well, I know the records are usually anywhere from like 2 or 3 million, give or take, right? Imagine selling 4 or 5 million copies of an expansion within 24 hours. I think definitely doable, right? If they went free to play. Now, this is the one where, so these are all ideas I came up with today just because I was bored, but I think all of this would realistically work. The prices obviously could be adjusted. I think this is me being very conservative with the prices, just given how a bunch of other games operate, and just because you don't want the prices to be too large, because then not a lot of people will buy it. I mean, pretty sure plenty of people will. So going back to the VIP member card, which I brought up before. So because Darkmoon Faire, you have to buy tickets um, in order to initially start playing the mini games and then win those games, right? A VIP member card would just give you unlimited access to all the mini games in the Darkmoon Faire, right? So you never have to spend gold, right? You never have to spend your tickets. You're just playing endlessly, right? It's like a unlimited Dave and Buster's, card. You're just there playing all day. You're not spending any money, right? They can add obviously, mount skins, right? Reshading, I'm going to assume doesn't take a lot of effort. So if they add different mounts to the mount to the store, right? I don't think it's that hard to add a different shade or reskin to it that people might prefer over the original, right? Very easy money. Same thing with pet skins. Being able to add unique hunter pets as well as skins, just as a thought. Having with the whole companion system, right? I think having the option for them to serve as a vendor, I think would be huge for people, right? You're offline, you want to sell certain things, but you don't want to, get hit with that auction house fee, right? You want to min max profits, right? Pay $10, you can literally give your companion items to sell, and they'll be outside your house or somewhere. And if someone passes by, they want to buy it, they'll buy it, right? So it's pretty easy and simple. And then if you want more slots for them, you can just buy that, as stated. Now, given that transmog is very popular, and I know a lot of people who change their transmog on a daily, even weekly basis, I think given the option to change the color is huge. So inscriptions can make dyes, obviously, from plants. They can sell that in the auction house. But what if you don't want to spend your gold in the game and you just want to buy it through the store? Simple. You create bundles, right? So a complimentary bundle of different colors. You know, there could be 50 different dyes in there. They'll be $5, right? Random assortment will get you more, but same thing, $5. If you want to, buy every color that there is for a dye, they might give you 5, 10, 15. That's $20, right? And this is stuff I know people would buy like crazy, right? And then same thing, to really monetize, inscription can also make vanishing dye, right? So in order to change the color, you need to remove it first and then reapply the new color. So again, this is stuff you can buy in the game or just through the store to make it easier if you want to save gold in the game. I think all of this would be a great feature, especially if you can, dye your furniture in your home. I think all of this would honestly easily trump the current revenue they make from the WoW token, which in and of itself does create a problem. Whereas all of this is just cosmetic and not as invasive. So kind of continuing with microtransactions, right? For companions, right? I think a phenomenal system. What if they give us unique companions? What if we could have, Sylvanas, Jaina, whoever as like a unique companion that will always follow us, do our chores in the house, fight with us while we're questing, right? That's easy money for them. Having more slots for companions, again, easy money. Adding daily updates for new, hairstyles. That some are free, but majority could be, paid. Unfortunately, I know plenty of people that would buy it, if not for themselves, for their companions, right? Same thing with body art, tattoos. I mean, I've always personally wanted tattoos in the game for a while. Kind of jealous only Horde had them, but you know that's an option. Facial accessories, furniture pieces as well, because I know housing would be huge, so they can very easily make a lot of money off that. A more scummy approach, which I'm not a fan of, but if they do go free to play, having an account-wide currency stash, right? That way, whatever progress you make on one character, you can kind of transfer some of it, if not most of your currencies, to other characters with little to no um, drawbacks besides just dropping 25. And then obviously the dungeon editor, having more forge slots, which, like I said before, would be huge in the right hands, right? And I know a lot of people would go crazy, and again, $10 for some people is nothing. So again, that would also just be a lot of revenue. And then kind of following the theme of the VIP member for the Darkmoon Faire, why not have one for the barbershop and transmog? So you could edit your character and do your transmog endlessly, essentially for free, but I mean, you're technically paying for it, right? Resurrection scrolls, again, just coming up with different ideas. I mean, how many people would buy it? I don't know. But if we do make combat more challenging, I'm pretty sure some people might spend $5 here or there in order to prevent resurrection sickness, because again, it prevents, or rather, it saves you from spending your gold on repairing, right? And then obviously just having emotes, considering, and I'm not a huge fan of Fortnite, but the amount of emotes that game has, and for it to be free to play, is insane, right? Final Fantasy also has a wide selection of emotes, and then World of Warcraft is just sitting here with, I mean, have they ever added any new emotes in the game as far as I can tell, besides like the dances for new races? I just, again, they could very easily do a whole lot more. And then kind of to start wrapping up, in regards to making money, I think private servers are huge for the game. They're extremely good for the economy of the game as a whole. So I think the biggest drawback with private servers is a lot of people might not want to play on one, just because the whole idea of, if I make a character, what's the point? But it's just going to shut it down, right? Why spend money with them, if they're gonna get shut down, I'm gonna lose everything. I'm wasting money, right? So I would propose, and this is a hit or miss idea, just because it could go very badly, but in an ideal situation, you know, I think it would also be a very good PR for Blizzard to extend an olive branch to a lot of these private servers and essentially host them on the launcher, right? So the launcher would have a private server tab that would host all or a link to all the private servers that they are partnered with, right? So you click on it, it will take you to a website of that developer or that specific private server, right? To kind of learn more. If you're interested, download the launcher, make an account, what have you, right? And all they would have to do for hosting and kind of providing minimal support is, maybe take anywhere from 2, 3, 5 to 10% of their overall revenue for the year just for being hosted, which again, that's the hit or miss idea, just because with how greedy they've been, I don't know if it would be that low. I could definitely see them going higher, but the ideal scenario would be that, this, let's say 5% accumulated versus having, I don't know, 5, 10, 15 private servers who are giving you 5% of their annual, earnings for you just to host them, literally doing the bare minimum, right? That's easy free money. Now, would private servers agree to this? I don't know, just because I myself am not a developer, but I do see potential hesitation with it. Obviously, I think developers should be independent, right? Blizzard, Activision should have zero say on what they do with the game, right? But it would be something that I think would be really well perceived by the community, especially with everything that has been going on the last couple of months, right? And then obviously a lot of private servers do have a lot of good ideas. So the private server I've been referring to, I won't say the name, but if you Google classless WoW or even Conquest of Azeroth, Conquest specifically blew my mind when I discovered it. It's still in development, but it adds, I think, 21 unique classes, right? Classes we've never had. So like Necromancer, right? In World of Warcraft, which I think is phenomenal, right? The whole fantasy of having just a bunch of minions. I know Demonology Warlock kind of gives it to you, but Necromancy is just so cool with the way they designed it, along with a lot of other different classes. And I think having all these really cool ideas being created by essentially small indie developers using Blizzard assets, Blizzard could realistically hire them to, assist with the development of retail or, WoW 2.0, or even just copy some of those ideas and just kind of pay it forward, right? Because it's something that's already being worked on, it's already something that's being troubleshooted and balanced out by this small indie developer, so they can very easily just try and either take it or copy it for retail, and then the private server can still continue to do, their own thing and be completely independent. Now, ultimately, my goal with this whole video was to honestly just make WoW great again. I mean, in its current state, it's a game I've played for years. I loved it, but I just can't bring myself to reinstall it or to even sub again, just because it's really lost its appeal. I mean, I don't want to sound like a broken record. A lot of people have, made their own videos, talked about it, but ultimately, I think everything I'm proposing would be a great fresh start, right? To be able to retcon a lot of their mistakes, to be able to just honestly start fresh, right? Build up the jailer for what he really could be, right? An actual universal threat, and not just some guy that was a threat for like a year and a half, kind of thing, right? I mean, they could definitely build him up, kind of like they built up Arthas, right? We could definitely use some more backstory, or even somebody else in general. I think ultimately making a new MMO and a new engine, I think for the health of the company and for the health of the game, would be better long term than just continuing to add to World of Warcraft as it stands, because they have a lot of old content which they don't use or they don't know how to recycle, and it's honestly just, it's wasted assets that no one is using or utilizing in any way. Now, obviously, introducing new characters, building on older ones, I think would be phenomenal, right? Just because a lot of us can all agree that separating the game with audiobooks and other novels just isn't the way to really build up a story, right? We want it all in a single place. So again, an opportunity for them to, in my opinion, do the right thing and just to kind of refocus their energy into something that would really benefit them long term. And then obviously, finally, make bank. If they want free to play and monetize it the way I've kind of presented, or generally, they would make a lot more money. And honestly, I think a lot of us would also be a lot happier if we weren't forced to pay a sub for a product that we didn't really approve of or had fun playing. Now, ultimately, if you made it to the end of the video, I do appreciate you watching. Give me a like, comment below if you agree, disagree, or any other modifications you think. I didn't want to go too in depth because realistically, I don't think any of this will happen. But I was bored, wanted to make a video just for the hell of it. Again, if you made it this far, I do appreciate you watching and hope you have a good day.